You're listening to Kitchen Table Finance. Join Dave Shotwell and Nick Nauta as they cut through the complexity of financial planning and serve bites of investment advice that are both personal and practical.
Hey, Dave, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Nick. How are you?
Splendid. Thank you for asking.
Splendid. I love it. I love it. Splendid.
So, excellent. As promised, we are going to talk about my personal best and worst money moves after we put you through the winger last time, right?
Yeah, I told you you'd get your turn, so here we are.
All good things come in circles. Is that what they say?
That's right. Something like that. Yeah.
Wonderful. So yeah. I guess let's just jump right in. I'll give you my worst, Dave. This is the first thing that came to my mind, and only you can be the judge of how it worked out. This is what I've
sure.
decided. So when I first got out of college, it was 2005, and Michigan was already into the recession that hit the rest of the country.
Mm-hmm.
So jobs for finance majors in Michigan were not plentiful. I had a about to be 1-year-old child at the time, and so we weren't looking to make any big moves and move out of Michigan. We wanted to be close to family, and so I started this trek of trying to find a real job, right? And so I eventually got hired about 3, maybe 4 months later to become a financial planner.
Yay!
Yeah, it was, exciting. First real job. Got to buy a new suit, the whole thing. Ended up moving to Lansing as a result of that. And what I did not really do too well is read the fine print of what this job entailed in a couple different ways. And so the first thing that happens when you become a financial planner is you got to start passing some tests. And these tests, of course, come with some charges that you obviously have to pay for. So the study materials, the classes, if you want to take them, the test itself. And so here I was, fresh out of college with a 1-year-old by then. And I had to basically put my entire financial planning curriculum test stuff on a credit card. Basically maxed it out, right?
Yeah.
So I started a job negative before I even got paid. And luckily, I passed the test in a couple months, so that wasn't too big of a deal. But the deal was, or at least I thought what the deal was, is that they were going to then reimburse me if I passed those tests. And it turns out that was not necessarily the case. And so now I had a big credit card payment every month. And in the financial planning world where I came through, which is really the insurance world, we were basically on a commission track. And so we needed to then, fresh out of college with all of that knowledge obtained by passing some tests, start selling stuff to people in order to get paid.
Right. The bitter irony of having to get started in a financial advising career by doing something that you would never, like if a client came to you and asked you, should I follow up on the credit card in hopes that it works out? It's like, is that part of the test?
Right. Yeah. Seriously.
Interesting.
Luckily enough, I was a college kid still at that point, and so I was used to eating ramen and not having a whole lot of disposable income anyways.
Yeah.
But so I did that for like 6 months and started to kind of have a couple of sales until the point where it just kind of all came crashing down. I wasn't making enough money and it wasn't going to work out. And the stipend that they gave me was running out and the credit cards were up there and the rent payments were coming due. I even got an eviction notice at one point.
Oh, wow.
And so I thankfully got a job that with much more stability because of the licenses that I had, moved into the bank and had an actual salary so I could start paying things down. And I learned a great lesson, a couple of different lessons. One is making sure that you have enough income and stable income to cover the bills and the things that you have. And living below your means is a part of that, not getting into that situation. I've never been in that situation since that time where I had credit card debt that I couldn't afford, or really any credit card debt that I was getting charged an interest rate on. I think once a year or two later, when I finished paying off the credit cards, I didn't have any I haven't had any credit card debt since that time that I've actually paid interest on, because I remember that feeling of having the credit cards, watching the interest, getting the eviction notice, and being like, "Oh man, what in the world am I going to do?"
Yeah, scary,
So,
but sometimes that's the best teacher, right?
it only took one lesson, and I'm lucky because some people it takes a lot of lessons, and so one is all it took. And so that was kind of the end of that. And then I would say the other lesson that I kind of learned from that experience was make sure you're reading the fine print and thinking things through, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting that both of our worst stories have a similar thread to them in that we kind of only saw the upside to the situation at the time we entered into it without really considering the potential downside.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And what I would say to that too is we both kind of made emotional decisions, right? Because like here I was, I graduated college, worked really hard to graduate with honors, and now I can't find a job, right? It didn't just show up at my doorstep. And at the time I was moving the construction road signs that you see, like the reduced speed zone. And I don't know if you've ever had the privilege of lifting one of those up, but they're
heavy. Yeah.
And throwing orange barrels around. We had this sea of orange barrels, and I spent an entire month just hucking orange barrels from the bottom to the top of the pile. And so a lot of it was just emotion of, well, I got this job. It's a real job, and I need to do it because, I don't want to be throwing orange barrels for the rest of my life.
Right. There's an interesting alternative lesson here that, maybe isn't as readily apparent, but in retrospect is, and I don't think this applies to my situation that I described, is that really what you were doing was kind of taking an extreme investment in yourself that paid off down the road, right?
Yeah. Well, I was at a young age and taking a risk for sure.
Right. And so, your main takeaway is you never wanted to be in that position again, but, maybe a less extreme version of that is actually not necessarily a bad lesson for, it's no different than people taking student loans to improve their education, if done intelligently. Betting on yourself is not a bad thing when you're not paying 14% interest on your credit card with no way out, or no easy way out. So
right.
You maybe went too far on the spectrum there, but on the other hand, it did work out, right? I mean, you're here.
Yeah.
We're
18
glad to
years
have
later,
you. So,
right?
Yeah.
So, well, it's interesting that you bring that up too, because one of the things that I thought was, I did kind of take a risk, and I wish I would have done it differently or known more about it, but it did afford me the ability, because I did take a similar risk where I went out on my own. I left the credit union that I was at for 7 years with the salary and the consistent clients and started my own business. And what I did was I made sure that I had a bunch of money in the bank, and I was able to cover if it didn't go according to plan. And my income I knew was going to go down, and it went down by maybe a quarter of what I had the previous year. And so, but I was ready for that.
Right.
And so that was a lesson in terms of being ready for it, but also taking risks is a good thing, right? Like in some cases, betting on yourself pays off.
It was a more mature version of what you had done previously.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I would echo that too. Yeah. That's good. That's good.
All right. On to some of the good ones.
Yeah. Well, gotta have a little sunshine after the rain, right?
That's right. So I actually threw a couple down here, and some of them are, the thing about decisions is 99% of them involve finances in some way, shape, or form. So
it's hard to avoid, right?
Some of them aren't closely tied to financial decisions. And so the first one, as I was kind of thinking about this podcast, knowing it was coming up and doing some prep, as I started to think back, I thought, this was really dumb. I can't believe I did this. I can't believe I got away with this. But in 2008, I was working for Fifth Third, and so the peak of the financial crash, things are coming down, and one of the options we had in our 401k is to actually put your 401k into, like, Fifth Third stock was an investment option in our 401k, which, by the way, they later got sued for. They actually used to force us to put our match in there, which I always used to take out.
I worked at Fifth Third's twin at National City, and very, very similar 401k arrangement. And we'll come back to that here in a minute. Go ahead, though.
So in 2007, 2008, when things started to go down, I stopped moving my matching funds. Instead of like selling the Fifth Third stock as soon as it came in, I just let it start accumulating because the stock was down, 50, 60, at some point 70%. And then I started transferring my non-stock portion into the stock once it dropped below $15, and then more at 10, to the point where when it got below $5, I just moved everything into Fifth Third stock. Mm-hmm. And to take it a step further, it hit about $3. This was after I left the bank. And then I converted everything into a Roth IRA because there was not a whole lot left anymore.
Yeah.
The silver lining, and really in hindsight, the luckiest part of this is it ended up working out. Fifth Third did not go bankrupt.
Yeah.
Their stock price rebounded. I ended up selling somewhere around $30 a share a couple of years later. And so I ended up making a good deal of money on that transaction. But, and I was at the time, I remember thinking, I'm 20 years old. If my entire 401k portfolio goes to zero and I restarted it all tomorrow, I really haven't lost that much, except for maybe a couple of years. That was the thought process. What did not occur to me, and the advice I would give myself now is, you idiot, not only do you work at this institution, so if they go bankrupt and you lose your 401k, like, that's a double whammy. Like, This is common sense stuff that we tell all of our employees or all of our clients.
Right.
But here I was, and I, pulled the trigger, and it ended up working out. But I definitely got lucky about it. That was way more luck than skill.
Yeah. Boy, I hope you don't tell this story to clients. No, I'm just kidding. Well, in retrospect, it ends up working out very well, and you made good money. And the moving it into a Roth at the bottom of the market is brilliant. I love that.
Yeah.
Or doing the conversion.
Right.
But like I said, I worked at Fifth Third's twin, really. They're both regional banks out of Ohio, and they had the same arrangement. Their match went into the company stock in the 401k. You were free to move it out, but most people didn't, and they knew most people wouldn't. And the bank they get some tax incentive, it works out more in their favor. Plus it creates more demand for their stock. There's all kinds of reasons why they do that. But they banked on the fact people would probably not move stuff out. And I remember talking to bank staff about it. I left in 2006. The bank was, like I said, Fifth Third's twin in a way, except the outcome during the financial crisis was very different. Where Fifth Third and National City both came down substantially during the financial crisis. Fifth Third got down to around $3 a share and rebounded, right?
Right.
National City ended up basically selling themselves to PNC at like around $2 a share when it had been 40 something, years before. And I've often thought about some of my former coworkers that maybe didn't do anything with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but we shouldn't downplay the fact that in just about every financial decision, there's an element of luck, right?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. It's interesting now as I tell the story, I have never gone back to look at, like, if I had just kept it invested in like the normal allocation, obviously an aggressive allocation at that point, how much better off would I have been doing what I did with Fifth Third stock versus the normal allocation? My guess is there would not be a whole lot of difference in terms of where I ended up versus where I could have potentially ended up.
I think we now have our summer internship research project. So stay tuned for that, because that poses an interesting question.
Right. I'm afraid to find out the answer. Maybe that's why I haven't really researched it.
Yeah, we'll do the work for you. We'll do the math.
Perfect.
All right. So what else has been good
So the only
decision
other
making.
one that kind of stuck out to me, we bought our current house almost 8 years ago in 2015, and this is another one of those where it was not skill, it was not me looking at the housing market predicting where it was going to go. It was just kind of we outgrew our house, and it was time to buy another house. And so, why it ended up being such a good deal for us is, and at the time, we had to go above the asking price. There's
Mm-hmm.
multiple offers. And back then, this was 2015, that was not very common, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking going into it, I was thinking, well, we'll offer, less than the asking price for a lot of these. And we ended up going over because we fell in love with this house. But the interesting thing, 7, almost 8 years later, is that the timing of it worked out perfectly because we were able to refinance a couple of times. And to me, that's way more important than what's happened to the value. Obviously, the value of the housing market has gone way up, and so the value
Mm-hmm.
of our house has gone way up. But more importantly, I locked in at this ridiculously low interest rate for 30 years. And so that's just one thing that I just don't have to worry about anymore because we intend on staying here for a long, long time. And so, I just look at what's going on in the housing market right now and the struggle that people have of
Mm-hmm.
selling a house with a low interest rate and buying another one. But just keep in mind, things are going to change over time. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really more about, if you're buying and selling in the short term is probably going to cause some people some trouble
Yeah.
if you don't have a long-term outlook. But if you're going to
Yeah.
go out and buy a house for the long term,
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. And just finding your long-term forever house, if you plan on being somewhere for a while, just makes a ton of sense in terms of how that all kind of worked out. But again, it was luck, right? It was just a
Well,
matter of circumstance of where we were at.
yeah, there's a lot of interesting little things in there. It may have been luck in the short run, but yeah, when your attitude is that you're buying this house not as an investment but as a home,
Hmm.
um, there's not as big a downside risk when you think about it in those terms.
Right.
And you know, and another like it's never going to feel right, right? I
Yeah.
mean, maybe if everything's cratered, if you knew you were able to buy a house in 2008, you might have had a pretty good inkling you were making a good deal, right?
Right.
But most of the time, prices have gone up. Most of the time, prices have gone up recently, and I always hear people say, "Well, I'm just waiting till things come down a little bit." Whether they're talking about stocks or houses or I don't know, pick your thing.
Yeah.
And with both houses and the stock market in 2015, if you had decided it was too expensive then and waited, boy, you would have found out what more expensive looked like.
Yeah.
you know, so and but the fact that you were looking out not 3 years, not 5 years, but tens and twenties of years
Hmm.
smooths that out, so it doesn't really matter. You're
Yeah.
not gonna you're not gonna look back and say, boy, you're not gonna look back in 2040 and say, boy, if we had just waited till fall of 2016, boy, we would have gotten a steal.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm making that date up. Not that that has any real relevance, but you know what I mean. We just held off for something.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just, yeah, it is interesting how it works and how you frame things and how you put them into
Yeah.
context, right? Like it's never been the housing decision was never an investment decision for us, right? Like we're never looking to make
Mm-hmm.
money off of it. And whether or not we sell someday, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
It's all relative to, where we're at and what we want to do, but it's never like I'm not planning on having a bunch of equity that I'm going to pull out of my house at some point in
Right.
the future, right?
Right.
Because that's
Right.
probably just going to go into another house in some way, shape, or
Yeah.
form.
Yeah.
So,
Sounds like you've been doing financial planning for people for a while.
yeah, indeed. So, speaking of that, the last one I'll give you, Dave, I came up with three. So and we talked about this one a little bit already. When I started my own business, and then even
Mm-hmm.
joining Shotwell Rudder Bear and joining you, I took a risk at the time to do something that I loved and I believed in. And that is something that, I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And I didn't know if I was going to end up making more money or, making any money, but I knew that I would never be able to look back and just not be, and be happy that I didn't try that or I didn't make that move. And most importantly, just the freedom and flexibility it gave me over my time and being able to do what I do and being able to do something that I love every day, even if I didn't make as much money as before.
Right.
The fact that I can do something that I enjoy every single day, I could do it forever. Right. Well,
Yeah.
until they kick the crazy old guy out of here, but much longer than the normal 65 or 60. I plan on being here for a long time, and so just that alone of being able to do something that you love and believe in is so much more important than the money side of it. And the funny thing is, my situation and everybody's situation that I've known that has gone this route usually ends up making more money in the end anyways, because it's an amazing thing that happens when you do something that you love and believe in, is people will come find you.
Yeah. Well, and whether you make more money or not, I can't remember anyone that I've worked with who made career decisions for the right reasons that ended up regretting it.
Yeah.
If it's reduced stress or just a more fulfilling role, even if the money's not there, if you're making that decision for the right reasons, the money will adjust. Whether you end up making it up, like you say, where people will find you and you end up being profitable, or you realize that, hey, I'd rather go without, that extra vacation, or, I don't need as fancy of a car if it means I can do the things I want to do on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. And it's not necessarily about the money or making more money. We're blessed and lucky to live in a country where, making money is a pretty, it's a thing that everybody has the ability to do. But in order to be able to do something you believe in, even if you don't make as much money, it's going to mean so much more for your well-being than making more money. Right. And so that's some of the things that I think about with a decision like this. And we've helped clients make similar decisions and do things in their lives that really help them get to this idea of, hey, I've got enough, right? I don't need to just chase dollars because I have enough, and having this sufficiency mindset. And this is actually, another preview of an upcoming podcast is a book that I read called The Soul of Money, and just this idea of having a sufficiency mindset. And this is, really what comes down to in terms of finding a job that you love and doing it and making more than what you need. Right. And that's a subjective number. So.
Right. Good. Well, any other lessons you want to hit on that were takeaways from these? We touched on them all.
I think we definitely did. In terms of, all the good and the bad, right? Just making sure that you're, making decisions, and I guess the biggest thing I would say too is, even some of the worst financial decisions I've made I'm grateful that I had them, because they taught me very important lessons that have led me to live a better life, right? So everybody's going to make mistakes. Everybody's going to have a bad financial outcome at some point. It's not necessarily whether or not it happens to you. It's what you do from there, right? What are the lessons? What are the takeaways? How do you adjust your behavior so that doesn't happen again? That's only going to make you stronger. That's only going to help you build the life and the financial plan that you want.
Right. Well, good stuff.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah,
appreciate it. Hopefully our listeners took something away from both of our best and worst personal money moves. And for sure, we would, if you're out there and have one that you'd like to share with us, we'd love to hear them. Shoot us an email at info@srbadvisors.com. Dave, as always, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Nick. I'll talk to you later.
This is a Zedia Media production.